Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amy and I have been a self-published author for about 6 years now. Has been 6. So this year it will actually be 6 months. As I said, I'm self-published and I've gone through Amazon's KDP program, and I really like the process of getting to be in complete control over like the book cover, how the book is set up, the pricing, really just everything. The only setback is it's not very profitable, so I don't recommend doing Amazon KDP unless you have like a great resource to really promote yourself and put yourself out there, because you don't really turn a profit. I don't really write to get a profit. I write because I feel like it's a gift that God has given me, and it's something that I want to share even if I, end up losing money in the process. So today I want to talk about my books that I published so far. I actually have a new book coming out called Distorted. It's coming out very soon. Probably by the time this video is out, it'll, be very, very close to the release date. So stay tuned for that. But let's start with my very first book that I published, Awakening. I've been writing ever since I was very young. I wrote lots of poems, little short stories. Back in 2014 is whenever I really seriously started getting into it. I would just write really, really short stories, like maybe 3 chapters long, and then I started building up, gaining more of a word count, more chapters, and I really, really wanted to publish a book. I just didn't know how. And then I had a friend who published through Amazon before, and he guided me through the steps and how to go about doing it, and my first book, Awakening, was published. This is the first edition of this book. I used Amazon's cover creator to create this cover, front and the back. It looks okay, it's just not as professional as I, would prefer now. But I did go to college for graphic design, so I do know Photoshop, and I was able to gradually over the years get better cover design. But this was the original cover design. I ended up publishing this book again, but as a re-release. In 2022, I released this version of Awakening. Looks a little bit more professional. I actually kind of have a funny story about why I ended up redoing this. There's this actress that I don't know if I'm gonna get into too many details of, but she's a writer and a producer and actress, and I just had this notion, what if I sent her my book and she makes a movie out of it? That did not happen. It could happen someday, but I did get a chance to send her my book, this updated version. So that's why I updated it to begin with, and God worked it out where I was able to send her a copy. I never heard back from her about it, but I was able to at least get that far. So now I'm going to read you the synopsis that I wrote for the back. Drew Madden is an alcoholic who won't admit it and is facing more than he can handle alone. As he struggles to get through college and choose the right path to take for a better future, he meets a friend who will ultimately be used by God to give him the answers to all his questions he's been pondering since childhood. Short, sweet, and simple. If you want to buy this book, you can get it on Amazon like the rest of my books. I also never mentioned that I wrote this book in 2019 while I was going through college and starting my first job. And it took me quite a few months. I think I worked on it over a span of at least 5 or 6 months because I didn't really like it at first, honestly. I thought it was kind of slow and boring and that nobody would like it, but I'm very glad that I went ahead and published it. Now we're moving on to my second published book that I published and wrote in 2020. This is The Tangled Web. This was one of my most favorite books to write. It just felt like it came very easily, and I just had so much fun with it. I actually started writing it around the time the pandemic started, so I was able to spend lots of time on it, and I got it done in at least a couple months. David and Nicole Stafford have wondered for 7 years what happened to their 5-year-old daughter, who was last seen on their front porch before she vanished in the thin air. They started a pediatric clinic in her honor, but working side by side for the last few years hasn't been able to save their marriage that began crumbling the day Rebecca disappeared. With the beginnings of an affair kept in the dark and a secret addiction, David and Nicole soon find out that a life built out of lies and deception can become a tangled web. Again, I used Amazon's cover creator to put this together, though I did do a little bit of Photoshop on it to get the font and to get this picture, and it is a lot bigger than the other book. I don't know if you can tell the size difference, but this is Awakening, my first book, and it's much thinner, so you get more bang for your buck on this one. Next, we're going to move into my third book, You're in Good Company. This book was such a blessing to me because I hadn't written anything for about 1.5 years before this one came along. I was constantly writing, but I wasn't coming up with anything good, anything that I felt like I wanted to publish. I was really pushing and forcing myself, and I was not having fun writing anymore. So it took a very long time for me to be able to get to a place where I could just, let it go and be like, if God wants me to write again, he'll work it out. And this is whenever You're in Good Company happened. When did I write this? I started writing this in early 2022 and published it a few months later. This one I did do all in Photoshop. The back is a little bit more put together. On seemingly dull, quiet Clemmer Street, there's more than meets the eye. Nancy Adams is hiding something about her husband's murder, Chelsea Todson wrestles with the decision to terminate her unexpected pregnancy, and Ruth Maynard is too much of a coward to stand up to her abusive husband and rebellious daughter. 3 women with so much in common, yet each one feeling as alone as a castaway on a deserted island. The choices they've made render them hopeless of ever finding forgiveness. After all, who in their right mind would give them a second chance? I don't really have any crazy stories about this book other than it came whenever I thought I'd never be able to write again, and I'm really grateful that God helped me write it. The next book on my list, my 4th book that I published, is Sweet Revenge. I wrote this one the same year as You're in Good Company, which was so crazy to me because I thought I was never going to be able to write again, and then I had 2 books in 1 year. This one, I definitely got more creative with the cover design. I really, really like the back. The Pettyjohns and the Horines are just like family. The Pettyjohns have no problem with 15-year-old Shelley Horine babysitting their 2-year-old son. That is, until a tragic accident happens. The 2 families break apart after the untimely death of the Pettyjohns' son, their feuding going public with the throng of media sensationalists fueling the fire. 22 years later, and the 2 families are still greatly at odds. Resentment turns to hatred as things start to heat up between the Horines and the Pettyjohns, events even taking a deadly turn. Things reach a point where they have to ask themselves, is revenge really so sweet? Whenever I wrote You're in Good Company is when I started making book trailers. I didn't put a lot of effort into the first one, but I really, really worked hard on the book trailer for this one, which you can find on my channel. Now I'm going to talk about the toughest book that I had to write up until this point, Point of View. I released this one in 2023, and I started writing it at the end of 2022. So I ended up having 3 books that I wrote in 2022, thinking I was never going to write again. 35-year-old Delaney Cromwell faces relentless backlash after taking on the role of pastor at Radiant Heart Church. She is especially confronted by Pastor Norman O'Harver, who is from the generation that believes the role of pastor is strictly for men. Things become increasingly dangerous for Delaney as she stands firm in her belief that God has called her to the pulpit. Despite receiving many complaints that her ideology is causing detriment to her congregation and that her teachings may not be biblical, Delaney is determined to prove there's nothing wrong with her liberal stance on Christianity. Constantly dodging harm, evading pressing questions from an old flame who's come back to town, and debating with her many opposers soon forces Delaney to take a closer look at her own point of view. So, as you've heard from the back of the book, this is about a woman pastor. And whenever God first presented me with the idea for this book, I was very hesitant to write it because I knew it would probably cause some controversy, maybe some hurt feelings from people who had varying opinions. But I knew God wanted me to write it. So with his help, I went ahead and started writing it. It was such an amazing experience. There were so many different instances during writing the book when God was just proving to me that this is what he wanted me to do. I have a list, multiple lists of things that he showed me whenever I was working on this book. And I really, really grew to love this book. I actually wrote 2 sequels to this book that have not been published. I can never decide if I want them to be published or not. This book did not actually sell very well. I feel like the more that I write, the fewer books that I sell, which seems like it should be different. Seems like it should be opposite. But that's just how it is. And, I'm just praying that I may not see a profit on my end or a good turnout on my end, but maybe the right person ends up with the book somehow. And even if I never know about it, as long as they get to read it, I'm happy. Now we're moving on to the most recent book that I published, my 6th book, Twist of Fate. This one was probably the hardest book I've ever had to write out of any of my books because there was so much research involved. This was actually the first time I ever really did any research for a book. I mean, there was times when I had done research in the past for books, but they weren't really as topical as this. And thankfully, I've never been involved in the occult, so I had to read up a lot about it and watch a lot of videos. I actually was very inspired by Angela Uchi's testimony, and I was able to use a lot of what she talked about as inspiration. When Regina Keegan checked her horoscope that morning, she never dreamed the prediction of unavoidable change might mean losing her 8-year-old daughter. Since spiraling into despair after the senseless shooting that terrorized the local elementary school, Regina clings to the predictions made by astrologers and psychics who promise to give her the hope and answers she's looking for. Along the way, she meets Private Detective Spencer Tyson, who she hires to find the school shooter. Detective Tyson is skeptical of Regina's newfound philosophy on life, but has a hard time voicing his opinions as he struggles with his own inner turmoil. As time progresses, they both begin to question if things really do happen in nothing but a twist of fate, or if there's something much greater at work. I really like the cover design for this one. It is much different than my other books, which are just like a single picture in the title. There's also the back, which in certain lighting you can see more detail, which I like. So this is my most recently published book. And like I said, you can get all of these on Amazon. Whenever I get the physical copies of my newest book, Distorted, coming out, I want to do like an opening video if I can. So maybe you guys can see me opening it. It's always so fun to like get the physical copies and like see the book in print. So I would be really excited to share that experience with you guys. If you have any questions about my books, just leave a comment below. Go check out my books if you love to read Christian fiction or just fiction in general. I think you'd like it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.